Jesus, take the wheel. This is my story. And if you think you've heard something like it before, wait until you hear the part nobody saw coming, not even me. 6 months ago, my own husband looked me in the eye and told me I am smelling and lazy. And that changed my life completely.
He just sat me down one Tuesday morning with a cup of tea in his hand and quietly ended the life I thought I was entitled to. By the time he finished talking, I was sitting in my own parlor with no allowance, no house duties, and no idea who was really pulling the strings behind everything that had just happened to me. If you love real dramatic family stories like this, please subscribe now because you are going to want to see how this one ends. Let me take you back to where it actually started because trust me, it did not start with my husband. It started with his mother and a secret she carried for years that none of us knew about until it was far too late to matter. Chidi was a simple man, an accountant in a logistics company in Lagos, the type who ironed his shirt the night before and greeted the security guard by name every single morning. He believed marriage was sacred, that whatever came, you faced it with patience and prayer. I was the test of exactly how much patience one man could hold before it ran out. I wasn't always like this. In university, I was one of the finest girls in my department. Smooth skin, neat eyebrows, always smelling like coconut oil and confidence. Something switched off in me somewhere between graduation and marriage, like a generator that ran out of fuel and nobody bothered refilling it. By the time I became Chidi's wife, that switch had been off for a while, and he, blinded by love, simply hadn't noticed the darkness closing in. The first warning came exactly 2 weeks after our wedding. Chidi woke up one morning, reached for me the way new husbands do, and instead of coconut oil, something hit him that made his eyes water. He nudged my shoulder gently. "Good morning," he said. I groaned, mumbled something about 5 more decades, and pulled the blanket over my head. And when I snored, I did not do anything small. My snore had range. Chidi used to lie there wondering if NEPA had somehow wired a generator directly into my nose. He let it slide, the way new husbands do. "She's adjusting," he told himself. Famous last words. Days became weeks, and weeks became a full lifestyle. I did not bathe unless there was a very good reason. A wedding, an outing, maybe an old crush I wanted to look good in front of. Ordinary days, when it was just me, Chidi, and God, water simply did not touch my body. One evening, he brought it up gently. "Ngozi, my love, have you had your bath today?" I looked at him like he had insulted my ancestors. "Chidi, why are you disturbing me this early in the evening? I'm resting." "It's been a few days, baby." "A few days," I said, sitting up to deliver my lecture properly. "If you bathe too much, you will fade. Everyone wants to hear this, but nobody wants to believe it. Your skin needs its natural oils to breathe. I'm protecting my glow, Chidi. You should be thanking me." He blinked, genuinely lost for words at that level of confidence backed by zero science, and simply said, "Okay, Ngozi," before walking out, already planning to buy extra air freshener on his way home from work. That line became my signature. I said it so often, with such conviction, that by month 3, some quiet part of Chidi's soul had almost started to believe it too, out of sheer exhaustion. Now, let's talk about the underwear, because we cannot skip this part. I genuinely believed in what I called breaking things in before disposal. A good pair needed at least 2 weeks of continuous service before reaching its final form. Chidi discovered this the hard way one Saturday, pulling out a particular pair that frankly had developed its own personality. He held it between 2 fingers as far from his face as his arm allowed and shouted, "Ngozi, what is this?" I didn't even turn from the television. "That's my lucky pair," I said. "Don't scrub it too hard or the lock will wash out with it." He stood there holding sentient underwear, wondering what he had done in a past life to deserve this assignment. The bed sheets operated on a similarly vague standard. changed only when they started smelling like something specific. A definition so self-serving that Chidi eventually stopped asking and started changing them himself quietly on Saturday mornings while I slept through the entire operation. Then there was the toothbrush incident, which he still couldn't process months later. He walked into the bathroom to find his toothbrush had migrated from its cup into the soap dish, damp, sitting suspiciously close to my little tin of shea butter. When he asked, I shrugged. I needed somewhere to rest my earring, and your toothbrush was just there. He didn't ask further. He simply threw it away and bought a new one, adding it silently to his growing list of things he'd stopped questioning. My laundry system worked the same way. I called it the smell test. Clothes only washed once they failed a sniff conducted at arm's length. Anything that passed, even barely, went straight back into rotation. Chidi once watched in genuine horror as I pulled a blouse from the clean pile, sniffed it, made a face suggesting deep internal deliberation, shrugged, and wore it to a family event anyway. He didn't say a word the whole ride there. He just prayed nobody would stand too close to me. But nothing prepared him for the flask. I did occasionally perform small acts of wifely duty, usually when guilt tripped hard enough or when Mama Chidi was visiting and I needed to maintain appearances for a few hours. Packing his lunch was one of these rare acts. A reasonable woman would use a clean flask. I used the one that had been sitting under the sink for who knows how long, quietly growing its own private ecosystem. I packed hot jollof rice and stew directly into it and handed it to him glowing like I had just cured a disease. Baby, I packed food for you today. You'll eat like a king. He kissed my forehead and left for work, feeling like things were finally turning around. They were not. At exactly 1 o'clock in the office cafeteria, surrounded by colleagues, including his friend Ikenna, a man with a memory like an elephant and a mouth like a town crier, Chidi proudly opened that flask. The smell hit before the visual did, so aggressive that 3 people at the next table actually stood and moved away. He looked down and there, floating in what used to be jollof rice, was something green and fuzzy that should not exist in food, and perched delicately on the rim like it was posing for a photograph, a single visible cockroach leg. Chidi screamed, a full-pitched somebody call my pastor scream that echoed through the whole cafeteria. He knocked his own chair over, jumping back from the table. Ikenna could not hold it together, laughing so hard he had to grip the table, phone already out. Bro, I have to tell everybody about this. By the time Chidi got home that evening, tie loosened, shoulders slumped. He had already been nicknamed Roach Flask by 4 departments, and Ikenna had turned it into an office legend, complete with reenactments during lunch. He found me on the couch, wrapper tied loosely, hair looking like it had lost a fight with a pillow, watching a movie like a woman with 0 responsibilities. Ngozi, he said, tired. The flask. Which flask? The one under the sink. I don't remember when I last washed it, but I figured the heat will kill whatever was inside. He stared at me. The silence stretched so long that even I started to feel a flicker of concern. There was a cockroach leg in it, Ngozi. Ah, just the leg, I said, searching for a silver lining, completely missing why that made it worse. He didn't even have the energy to argue. He walked past me into the bedroom and lay face down on the bed like a man surrendering to fate. Now, if you are the type who likes stories that don't go where you expect, stay close, because everything you think you know about why Chidi's mother came into this story the way she did is about to flip on its head. But we'll get there. Let's talk about Nkechi first, Chidi's mother, the woman who raised him alone after his father died when Chidi was 12, trading fabric in the market with 0 patience for foolishness of any kind, especially foolishness wearing the title of wife. Her visits had grown less frequent over the months, mostly because Chidi, out of shame, kept postponing them. Mama, next week the house is under renovation. Mama, I'm not feeling well. Let's do next month. But a mother's instinct cannot be delayed forever, and one afternoon she simply announced she was coming whether it was convenient or not. Jesus, take the wheel, she said, walking into that kitchen. Is this my son's kitchen or a science experiment gone wrong? Mama, good afternoon. Oh. Everything is under control, I said. Under control? She snapped. That pot is growing a beard. It has seniority in this house now. Mama, rest is important too, I told her. Not everybody is built for hustle. Some of us are just built for vibes. Vibes, she said. Vibes is why my son is eating from a flask with a cockroach leg in it. At least it was just the leg, I offered. She looked at me the way you look at something you can't quite believe is real. My son married a wife, not a landlord for these dishes, she said. Fix this house or I will fix your marriage myself permanently. Then, Ngozi, when last did you bathe in this house? You have started again, oh, I said. I'll bathe later. It's not compulsory every single day. Later when, she said. You said the same thing yesterday. And so, yesterday's later is not today's problem, I said. Ngozi, your body needs soap. You are smelling. Soap is overrated, I said. So is water. Let me sleep, please. After she left that afternoon, she did not go home and simply fume the way I imagined. What none of us knew then, what I only found out much later, was that Nkechi went straight from that kitchen to a phone call that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with a decision she had been quietly sitting on for almost a year. See, Nkechi owed a debt, not money exactly, but something heavier, an old debt of loyalty to a woman from her hometown named Chiamaka. A woman who helped Nkechi through the hardest years after Chidi's father died, lending her capital for her fabric store when nobody else would, asking for nothing back except that one day, if Nkechi's fortune ever changed, she would look out for Chiamaka's daughter. That daughter was Chiamaka. And Nkechi had already, months before that flask, before that kitchen, quietly arranged with Chiamaka to bring her into Chidi's house the moment things reached a certain point. She wasn't waiting for an ordinary house help. She was engineering a rescue that would look on the surface like discipline, but underneath was really repayment of a promise she had carried for over a decade. If you are finding this funny or maddening or maybe a little familiar, you are not alone. Stay with me because things are about to get a lot more serious for me and a lot more revealing about the people around me. Chidi tried everything after the flask and after his mother's visit. Gentle conversations over tea, speaking softly about partnership. I would nod along, agree in the moment, then return to exactly the same behavior within hours. He tried gifts, new sponges, nice-smelling soap, a small vanity set with my name engraved on it, hoping the right tools might inspire me. I admired them for 2 days, then they joined the growing collection of unused items gathering dust in the bathroom. He even tried an ultimatum once, the closest he ever came to raising his voice. Chidi, I need things to change. I can't keep explaining to my mother why my house looks like this. I need you to try, just try. For a brief moment, I looked like I might take it seriously. My eyes softened, my mouth opened like I was about to promise something real. What came out instead was, Chidi, you are stressing yourself for nothing. Rest is important too. He wanted to scream into a pillow. Instead, he simply nodded and walked away, adding one more failed attempt to the pile. My friend Uju had known about all of this for a while, mostly through my own gist sessions, delivered proudly like achievements rather than confessions. Babe, you should have seen Chidi's face when he opened that flask, I laughed one afternoon, feet up on her couch. She laughed too at first. Ngozi, you are too much, I swear. Rest is a right. Men just want to control everything, even how often a woman baths. Do you, babe? But over time, even Uju started to notice the pattern shifting from funny to concerning.
One visit to my house, where she genuinely considered leaving her shoes outside out of fear for their survival, changed her tune. Ngozi, she said carefully, standing awkwardly by the door. I don't want to sound like your mother-in-law, but this has passed joke stage. Even I, your number one supporter, am struggling to breathe in here. Please don't join Nkechi's side, I told her, waving her off, already reaching for the remote. She left that day with a strange, uneasy feeling, the kind you get when a joke has quietly turned into something real. It didn't stop her from trying once more. A week later, she showed up unannounced with a gift bag, scented candles, a fresh loofah, a small journal labeled in glitter pen, my glow-up era. She sat me down and laid out a plan like she was presenting to investors. We're not calling this cleaning. We're calling this a reset, a glow-up. You light a candle, you journal your goals, and somewhere in the middle of all that main character energy, you also just casually bathe. It's not about Chidi, it's about you becoming that girl. I actually considered it. turning the candle over in my hands like an unfamiliar artifact. This does sound kind of cute, not going to lie. For exactly 4 days, it held strong. I lit the candle every evening, wrote one sentence each time. Today, I thought about resting, and I did. And even used the loofah once before deciding the water was too cold to commit fully. By day 5, the candle had melted into a shapeless blob from being too close to a fan, the journal had disappeared under a pile of clothes, and the loofah had taken permanent residence at the bottom of the shower, developing its own texture. Oju took one look at the abandoned bag and simply sighed. I really tried, Ngozi. I really did. Meanwhile, at Chidi's office, the Roach Flask nickname refused to die. Ikena made it his personal mission to keep the story alive, occasionally bringing it up in meetings just to watch Chidi's ears turn red. Chidi, our girl wants to know if your flask needs a blessing before the next board meeting, he said one afternoon, completely straight-faced, while the department tried not to laugh. Chidi developed a permanent tired expression, the look of a man who had accepted his fate as comic relief in his own storyline. But underneath the joke, something in him was quietly shifting. He loved me, genuinely, deeply. But love, he was learning, could not survive on patience alone. Now, if you've made it this far, you already know something has to break, and it's about to. But before we get there, if this story has you gripped even a little, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Because what happens next in my own house is the part that actually shocked me the most, and I promise you have not guessed it yet. The final straw came on an ordinary Tuesday. Chidi came home early, hoping to surprise me by cooking dinner, a small gesture of peace after weeks of tension. He walked into the bedroom to change and found me fast asleep in the middle of the afternoon, snoring at full volume, generator style, completely undisturbed. He tried gently to wake me. Ngozi, baby, wake up. I groaned, swatted at him like a fly, rolled over. It's 4 o'clock, he said. Sleep doesn't check the time, I mumbled into the pillow. He sighed, let me rest, and went to shower before starting dinner. It was reaching for his towel that he made the discovery that finally broke the last thread of his patience. His one clean towel, kept separate, specifically off limits, had clearly been used for something it was never designed for. He won't describe what he found, but let's just say it involved days-old, unwashed evidence of everything. He stood there holding it, in silence, the same way he'd stared at that flask months earlier. Something in him settled, not anger, something quieter, more final, a decision crystallizing. He didn't shout, didn't wake me to confront me. He simply set the towel down, got dressed, and sat in the parlor for a long time thinking. The next morning, I woke around 11, as usual, to find Chidi already dressed, sitting at the dining table with a cup of tea, looking calm in a way that felt strangely unfamiliar. Good morning, I said, stretching, scratching my head lazily. Good morning, Ngozi. Sit down, please. We need to talk. I sat, mildly curious, expecting another gentle lecture I could nod through and forget by evening. I've been thinking a lot, he began, about us, about this house, about what I actually want from my life, and I've made a decision. I raised an eyebrow, still not alarmed. Okay, what decision? I've decided, he said slowly, that starting today, I'm hiring a house help. Of all the things I expected, threats of divorce, another ultimatum, maybe him finally losing his temper, this was not it. A house help for what now? I said. You want me supervising somebody again? That's more work for me. No, Ngozi, let me finish, he said, raising a hand. I've already hired her. Her name is Chiamaka. She starts today. She'll be cleaning, cooking, doing laundry, everything. Full salary from my account. She'll also be reporting directly to my mother, who volunteered very enthusiastically to supervise her work. I frowned, confused, but still not fully alarmed. Okay, so what's the problem? This sounds like good news for me, actually. He smiled a tired, knowing smile. That's not everything, he said. Since Chiamaka will be handling the house and Mama will be supervising, I've also decided that you will be taking over my role at home. You'll be handling all outdoor errands, the market, bank runs, dropping documents at my office, dealing with the landlord, everything I used to quietly handle so you could rest. Since you no longer need to manage anything at home, your time is now fully free for that.
My confusion deepened. Wait, so I'm doing outside work and somebody else is doing housework for me? That's not bad, actually. And, he continued, gently but firmly, since Chiamaka will be living in the boys' quarters, and since I've asked Mama to personally handle grocery budgeting going forward, starting this month, your monthly allowance has been redirected to cover her salary and household running costs. You will need to start covering your personal expenses independently. The room went quiet. I sat up straighter. Wait, say that part again. Which part? The allowance part. Ah, yes, he said, sipping his tea calmly. Since you are no longer managing the house, because clearly that wasn't something you wanted to do, I figured it made sense to redirect those funds to someone who will actually manage it. You did mention several times how much you value your independence. I'm simply respecting that. You are free now, Ngozi, completely free. No house duties, no allowance tied to house duties. You can rest exactly the way you always wanted. There it was, the trap, elegant and airtight, closing gently around me. I opened my mouth, closed it, opened again. But Chidi, if I'm not managing money for the house and my allowance is gone, how am I supposed to do my hair? I am sure you'll figure it out, he said, simply, standing, adjusting his tie for work. After all, you've always said rest is a right and hustle isn't for everyone. I'm just making sure you get exactly the rest you deserve in every area of your life. He kissed my forehead, the same way he had the morning of the flask, except this time there was no warmth in my expression, only dawning, horrified realization, and he walked out the door, leaving me sitting there speechless, possibly for the first time in my life. For the rest of that day, I sat in the parlor running numbers I'd never bothered to think about before. I had no personal income of my own. My small hairdressing business, the one I'd started with excitement right before the wedding, had quietly died months ago because of neglect, because Chidi's allowance had made it feel unnecessary. Now, that allowance was gone, redirected to a house help who was at that very moment humming cheerfully in the kitchen, scrubbing a sink I had ignored for months. Chiamaka, it turned out, was excellent at her job. Within hours, the house smelled like actual food instead of neglect. The fridge was reorganized, that mysterious growing thing finally identified and disposed of, and Chiamaka reportedly screamed almost as loud as Chidi had for the record. The parlor sparkled. Nkechi arrived that same evening to inspect the new arrangement and practically glowed with satisfaction, walking through the transformed house like a queen surveying her kingdom. Ngozi, you see how peaceful the house feels now? This is what I've been trying to tell you since day one. I said nothing, sitting stiffly in the corner, arms crossed, watching a stranger effortlessly do in one day what I had refused to do for an entire marriage. It stung in a way I hadn't expected. It was actually Chiamaka herself, weeks later, who let something slip that changed everything I thought I understood about that whole arrangement. We were folding laundry together one evening, something I now did without being asked, and she mentioned, almost casually, how grateful she was that Mama Nkechi remembered her mother, Ijeoma, from all those years ago, and how she'd promised her own mother she'd work hard here because Nkechi had done so much for their family back when nobody else would help. I stopped folding. I asked her what she meant, and slowly, piece by piece, it came out. Nkechi hadn't just hired an efficient stranger. She had been planning to bring Chiamaka into this house for almost a year, only waiting for the moment things reached a breaking point, because she owed Chiamaka's mother a debt of loyalty from her hardest years as a widow, and this was her way of quietly repaying it while also giving me, her son's wife, one final undignified push towards waking up. The kitchen scene, the shouting, the disgust, all of it had been genuine in the moment. But underneath it, Nkechi had already made her decision long before that flask ever hit the table. She wasn't just angry. She was executing a plan that had nothing to do with me personally and everything to do with loyalty that none of us had ever met, promised over a decade earlier. Sitting with that information changed something in me. It wasn't just Chidi who had quietly decided he deserved better. His mother had been carrying her own long, patient plan the entire time, one that had nothing to do with me personally and everything to do with loyalty, and I had simply been the reason it finally came due. With no allowance and nowhere else to turn without swallowing an enormous amount of pride, I realized I needed money for basic things: my hair, my skincare, small comforts I had always taken for granted. I thought about asking Chidi directly, but something about his calm, unbothered demeanor since the announcement told me that door was closed, at least for now. So, reluctantly, painfully, I did something I hadn't done in months. I dusted off my old hairdressing kit hidden at the back of a cupboard and put up a small post advertising my services to the neighborhood. Nobody responded at first, my reputation had preceded me, but eventually, out of sheer desperation, I took on a small job for a neighbor's daughter's birthday hairstyle, and something unexpected happened. I was good at it, genuinely good. Doing something productive with my hands, focused and present, felt different from lying in bed scrolling through other people's highlight reels. For the first time in a long while, I felt something resembling pride. Earned pride, not performed pride.
Weeks passed. Forced by circumstance rather than sudden enlightenment, I found myself slowly rebuilding routines I had abandoned. I started taking on more clients, which required me to leave the house, which required me to actually bathe. Imagine that, which ironically led me back to the version of myself I used to be before marriage dulled me into complacency. Chiamaka remained in the house, much to my initial resentment, but over time, watching her work ethic up close, waking early, taking pride in small tasks, moving through her day with purpose rather than avoidance, did something to me that months of Chidi's lectures never managed. It made me genuinely, quietly embarrassed of who I had allowed myself to become. One evening, about a month into the new arrangement, I approached Chidi after dinner, a dinner I had actually helped Chiamaka prepare, standing awkwardly in the kitchen, asking questions like a curious child rather than a supervising wife. "Chidi," I said, voice smaller than he'd heard in years, "can we talk?" He nodded, setting down his phone, giving me his full attention. "I've been thinking a lot," I admitted, echoing his own words from weeks earlier, "about everything. About the flask, about your mother, about just everything. I think I got comfortable in the worst way possible. I convinced myself that resting and neglecting were the same thing, and that any push toward change was somebody trying to control me. But it wasn't control. It was just you wanting a partner, and I gave you a stranger who happened to share your bed instead." Chidi listened quietly, the same patient way he always had, but something in his eyes softened genuinely for the first time in months. "I don't want Chiamaka's salary to keep coming from cutting off from you," I said. "I want to actually contribute again to the house, to us, to myself. I've started building my hairdressing thing back up, and it's small still, but it's mine, and it's real. I'm not asking for the allowance back. I'm asking for a chance to actually be a partner, not a problem you have to manage around." Chidi reached across the table and took my hand, genuinely, warmly, for what felt like forever. "That's all I ever wanted, Ngozi," he said softly. "Not a perfect house, not a spotless flask." We both laughed at that, the joke finally, mercifully starting to lose its sting. "I just wanted us to actually be building something together, instead of me building alone while you disappeared into the background of your own life." Things didn't transform overnight into some unrealistic fairy tale. I still occasionally slept in too late, still occasionally needed reminding about basic things, because real change, real growth takes consistency, not a single dramatic moment. But the difference now was effort, genuine, visible, consistent effort. I kept my hairdressing business running. I started bathing daily, willingly, not under threat, and even joked about it myself one morning, laughing, "Look at me, Sha, fading gradually every day, one bath at a time, finally able to laugh at my old excuse instead of hiding behind it." Chiamaka eventually moved on to another job months later, once I had genuinely proven I could manage the house myself. But she left behind more than a clean house. She left behind an example, a quiet standard I had finally decided to hold myself to,
not out of fear or manipulation, but out of self-respect. Nkechi visited months later, and this time, walking through the door, she paused, looked around at the clean, lived-in, genuinely happy home in front of her, and simply said, "Ngozi, this house is finally smelling like peace." Then, after a bit, with a small smirk, she added, "And you too, thankfully." She never told me the full story of Chiamaka's mother and the debt she had carried for over a decade. I only learned it because Chiamaka herself let it slip one evening while we folded laundry. And honestly, I think Nkechi preferred it that way. Some debts you repay quietly and let the people around you believe it was only ever about discipline. Even Chidi at his office eventually had to watch Ikenna retire the Roach Flask nickname after he proudly brought a properly packed, well-labeled, thoroughly clean lunch for an entire month straight, daring anyone to find a single complaint. And I, the same woman who once declared with unwavering confidence that bathing too much would make you fade, became unexpectedly one of the neighborhood's most requested hairstylists, known now not for my chaos, but for my surprising, hard-earned discipline. So here's what this whole story really comes down to. Rest is not a crime. Nobody is saying you should walk yourself into the ground trying to prove your worth. But there's a real difference between resting and disappearing, between choosing peace and choosing neglect. Self-respect is not about performing for anybody else's approval. It's about the standard you hold for your own life, your own space, your own body, even when nobody is watching, even when nobody is checking your flask. And sometimes the people who love us won't shout, won't fight, won't beg forever. Sometimes they'll simply make one quiet, clever decision that holds up a mirror you can no longer look away from. And sometimes the people around that decision have been carrying their own quiet reasons for a lot longer than you ever realized. If this story made you laugh, made you think, or reminded you of somebody you know, no judgment, we all know an Ngozi. Let me know which part had you the most, the flask, the lucky pair, or Nkechi's kitchen speech. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel because there are so many more stories exactly like this one still coming. Thank you for watching till the end. Until next time, take your bath, you will not fade, and I'll see you in the next story.